Welcome to the Red and Blue Cybersecurity Show, brought to you by the Prancer Intelligent Cloud Security Technologies. My name's Jeff King, Chief Strategy Officer for Prancer and a 40-year veteran of working with technology implementations with a variety of growth companies. Okay, so you said Red and Blue. Why that name for a podcast? Well, in the cybersecurity industry, there is continuous exchange of viewpoints about the most effective approach to gaining cyber health. A blue team representative or an internal security expert wants to address cyber health from an internal perspective and believes in a defensive security measures. The red team representative, this person believes in an offensive security, and the best way to protect the data is to constantly probe the company's cloud defenses and find security holes. This mindset is trying to find vulnerabilities from the outside and break through cybersecurity offenses. Our topic today will be focused on how managed service providers deliver their traditional development projects, but increasingly having to ensure cyber health in all of their services. Our speakers today is Kumar Chandramouli and Farsi Madhavarpur. Hey, Farsi, the CEO of Prancer Cybersecurity, you'll be representing the red team today. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. My name is Farsi Madhavarpur, and I have more than 15 years experience in cybersecurity and work with many Fortune 100 companies migrating to the cloud and creating cloud native applications. Most of the time, my role to do the architecture, to do the security of the cloud, make sure all the security guardrails are in place when they're migrating their workloads to the cloud environment. Also, work with many managed security service providers out there and helping customers to migrate their workloads to the cloud and still be able to have a secure environment. So, I started doing programming when I was like a little kid back in middle school, and from that time, when the cloud is coming up back in 2007, 2008, started to investigate what are the possibilities, and worked with Amazon AWS, Azure from early days, and that's my focus for the last 15 years. And migrating many large projects to the cloud, helping customers, and with the focus of the cloud security. Always thinking about an outsider, how we can break into the systems, how we can make sure the cloud is a secure environment and no attacker can, break into the system. So that's always my concern and the way I'm thinking of. So as Jeff mentioned, there are like two mindsets we can think about. One is from the internal organization, the other is from the outside perspective, how to break into the system. And I'm a representative of the red team, which is thinking from the outsider, how we can break in, how we can make sure the security guardrails are protecting the company asset in a way that we can make sure our applications, our data, our company assets are secure within the cloud environment. And
All right.
Here.
Awesome, man. You're a great representative for the red team there. So, hey, Kumar, you're the CPO of Prancer, will represent the blue team. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Hey, all. Good afternoon, and welcome to the podcast, Red and Blue Cybersecurity Show. So I'm sure that you have a hell of a time here. My background is primarily always been cybersecurity. It's been 15 years, lived and breathed security for a long time, I feel. Done identity and access management before, risk and compliance, and full stack cybersecurity, meaning built multiple security operations centers globally, built threat intel, threat hunting programs, forensics and investigation teams, application security testing, data privacy programs. So I love always to help organizations to secure and stay ahead of the threat, right? It's always been the case. We have to stay ahead of threats. And how do we do that effectively? Every year passes by, the threats are growing and the attacks are different, and you have to stay ahead of the curve. So that's always been the focus, and we use that mentality to help secure assets and programs for a lot of top Fortune 10, Fortune 100 companies. And I'm really excited to share what is something that chief executives and CIOs and CISOs would be expecting and should expect from an MSS providers moving forward to secure their assets, right? I'm really happy to be here, and we're glad to share those for you all. So, Jeff.
All right. So both of you can be able to explain this. What is cyber health, and especially in the managed service perspective. Just to set the framework, the National Institute of Standards and Technology calls cloud cybersecurity, says it involves 5 stages: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So our managed service clients are increasingly being asked to and pressured to ensure they deliver their digital transformations, but each one of them are also saying they're getting increasingly pressured to deliver that cyber health on top of that. So Kumar, from your standpoint, you came from the inside of a lot of large corporations and dealt with a lot of the managed service groups. What are some of the things you expected from the managed service providers in delivering this cyber health?
Yeah, definitely. MSS providers are a big integral part of all the programs that I have managed and I have built. Um, because from cyber perspective, it's more about your integration of vendors, MSS providers, internal teams, and analyst teams. That's what gives you an ability to build the best program out there. So you definitely wanted to have everybody play a role. And MSS definitely played a big role. And for these programs, and I think organizations should look from that perspective when talking to MSS providers, is how are they understanding the strategy and business objectives of an organization. So I felt many times if they don't have a visibility, if they are lacking understanding of our strategy, that's a big failure. MSS contracts will not go really, really well, in my opinion, right? And I think
Cyber health strategies.
cyber health strategy, yes,
Right.
absolutely. You're spot on. When I say cyber health, right, what I would think of cyber health is I should not be constantly looking for what's missing, what's failing, and I should be able to give a pretty good view pretty quickly by the service providers of what is the cyber health right now. Like, are we in the red or in the green or the blue? That is the biggest challenge everybody's facing, but that's where an MSSP can differentiate themselves if they do a great job in doing that. I think every executives out there, CIOs or C-suite or people who are managing cyber teams are looking forward to that, right? That's clear definition from my perspective of cyber health, to make sure that it's being tracked. Now, from an MSS providers, I would expect them to understand all the security weak points. And when a cloud migration happens, I would like them not only sit down with the security teams, but they should push forward to have a conversation with the cloud and infrastructure teams together, right? That's a missing piece. It's some organizations, it's always been two different um, organization within the CIO umbrella, within the information security umbrella, but it is the job of MSP providers to push forward to talk about those items without understanding those priority and how the teams are operating. They will miss out big on infrastructure, application, and the controls that's built around this, right? I think that is the key. I would expect them to do that.
Okay.
I want them to come forward with APIs, how they secure them, how do they secure the compliance violations and data breaches ahead of time before I sign a contract. I would like to see them express how they take me towards, as you said, from NIST framework, right? Towards the predict and prevent side, than keep me on the response side. In my perspective, we have built a lot of SOC teams, and they are advanced and they are delivering the job, which is fine. But we don't want to spend more investment dollars into that anymore, right? So if you want to invest into predict, prevent, and protect area, and I'm looking forward for MSS providers to do that more effectively, showcase that, put that in the contract, and if that requires a POC to be done, so be it, right? And how quickly can they help me take the applications to market? That's more important in that sense. And I would like to see this end to end. It has to be comprehensive, it has to be effective, and it should definitely have value in adding different teams together. And I should be able to see that from an MSS proposal, right? And this is what will make my teams and organizations who are managing this executives to be successful.
All right.
I will look for it. Yeah.
Okay. So identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. Fasi, from the red team perspective, what would, in all your experiences, what is the kind of things that are expected to stop from your side? You're on mute.
Okay. Yeah. So from the red team perspective, usually companies they start to use multiple security tools, and those security tools are very good in finding the security problems in one domain or multiple domains. But the problem is, like in big enterprises, when like an MSSP, they want to start to do the migration project or do the cloud native project, they see so many findings from these tools, and usually finding what needs to be prioritized and what we really need to work on. That's a challenge for MSSPs and also internally for the companies. But what we need to do, we need to shift our mindset from like an internal organization viewpoint to an external attacker. So basically what needs to happen is think like an attacker and prioritize the risk and the problems, the security misconfigurations from an attacker perspective. Which one is more important? How they can say, control of the systems and prioritize those items to make sure we are working on the right security problems and on the right priority order. Usually, when a cloud migration project happens and MSSP they want to start migrating the resources, the workloads from the on-premise to the cloud, the mindset of the company, because they worked in the on-prem environment, they usually think about like creating a perimeter network and secure the gates to make sure nothing can come in. And then inside that network, we can have all the applications working. We assume that everyone is authenticated and the authorization they are in place. But when we are migrating to the cloud, that mindset is not valid anymore, because on the cloud side, usually the way that we have to think is from a zero trust perspective and make sure every single application is secure by its own. And that's a challenge for MSSPs. And the reason is, if you want to do that manually, it takes time, it takes effort, it increases the timeline of the project. And that's usually not acceptable from the blue team, because they want things to be done as fast as possible. So the solution here would be to have an automation to be able to do the security validation in an automation fashion, so we can migrate the workloads and do the migration project or the cloud native project as fast as possible. Usually when it comes, for example, if you talk about like the red team perspective from an offensive security validation, usually those tools, first of all, are not available as a complete automated fashion. For example, Kumar talked about the API scan, or if you want to do the authenticated scan, because the applications are now going to the cloud and the MSSP wants to make sure those applications are secure. We have to start doing the offensive security, doing the pen testing, and there are very limited tools that they can do the authenticated scan or a good API scan result out of the security validation that they're doing. The other challenge that MSSP could seize by migrating the workloads from the on-prem to the cloud, usually companies, they want to do the re-architecture of the solution. It's not like usually a simple shift and lift. They usually want to do the re-architecture, for example, breaking down a monolithic application into a containerized application. And again, the challenge that the MSSP could face is on the serverless, on the container-based workloads in the cloud, the attacks and the problems, the security problems are not very well understood. On the virtual machine, usually what's happening on the DAS tools, dynamic application security scanning tool, they install like an agent, they get information out of that, and based on that, they do some offensive security validation. But when they're changing the application to a containerized application, it's usually unknown how to do the security validation, and that's like a good opportunity for an attacker to aim at those workloads and start getting information out, and then use those entry points to do the lateral movements and go to the other applications in the cloud.
So we got the cloud migration on-prem going to a constantly changing cloud, lots of options, lots of different infrastructure settings. And we're saying that is one that requires a different set of tools, and you have to be able to constantly probe it from your red team perspective, and it's a totally different game.
Exactly, and even to make things worse, even for the cloud applications, when you want to create resources in the cloud, there are multiple ways of doing that. So we can always use the console, the web interface to start creating resources, but that is not scalable. And usually companies start using infrastructure as code to be able to provision multiple resources in a very short amount of time, and being able to scalable, repeatable, and have all the good things for the migration project. And because those interfaces are like from different APIs, different people are using them, also make sure there is no security misconfiguration across the board. That's also a challenge on top of the challenges I talked about. So make sure for an MSSP provider, because they want to have a repeatable process across multiple projects, make sure that they can effectively security scan the IAC code that they want to create resources in the cloud. If someone uses another tool, another mechanism, another interface to create resources in the cloud, also they can detect, and if there is any misconfiguration available, they can respond to those items. So these are like all the challenges that we see for an MSSP when they enter into a contract with an enterprise to start migrating the workload or create cloud native applications.
So identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover is a lot different in the cloud scenario. So having tools that match that kind of difference is really important to have. Well, both of you talked a lot about this process of getting more control and shifting left in the development process. And So when you're actually migrating something from that on-premise situation onto the cloud, then it was very important in your point of view that the kind of controls we have are very important. Tell us a little, Kumar, from your standpoint of shift left, what was that? Why was that so important from your internal perspective in the blue team?
Yeah, before talking about shift left, I really like what Farshid just mentioned about the time to market. I think that's very, very critical and very important for organizations which have a run of a mill, a lot of applications have to go live. And if they are going in a time lapse manner to be tested or validated for security vulnerabilities and put in queue before they want to go live, that's not something we would like to want to see, right? Um, we have seen time in, time out. Security was the aftermath. Although the shift has changed, not completely yet. It's still an aftermath in a lot of the organizations. A lot of the people put the application functionality still in the front, and still security is being tested and comes in the last minute, right? So organizations are tuning in to support that as well. And I would like to do that as well, because at the end of the day, we are helping business be successful. So it should not be a conversation about can they would have came earlier or not, but we have to build solutions to address that in the beginning, right? And I think that's what I liked what Farshid just shared. Definitely MSSP providers, if they do that, having that in mind, I think that's fantastic because that's all we wanted to see. And the executives wants to think about, okay, there are so many applications, but they're going in a light pipeline. It's security tested, validated, and not escalated, right? So that's a definitely good strategy. Now, Jeff, you talked about shift left,
Yeah.
and your question is, what do I think about that, right? Definitely, shift left is absolutely necessary, and we touched upon it a little bit earlier, right? Uh, I like to stay in the predict prevent this on the left side, right? Not on the response side. Now that I mean I don't want it to respond, cybersecurity incident response is one of the key area that I used to oversee for many companies.
Yeah, a lot of
Uh,
budget over there.
it
Yeah.
is a lot of stress.
Yeah,
Um,
stress.
it is, and you have to work through those situations. And definitely, a lot of people don't like to do that response, right? Also, we love to do and help organization, but that's not something we always wanted to be there, right? So being on the left, the investments going to the left, and that's on the shift left. From a technology perspective, how can it apply for us, right? Uh, the organization that I used to help and I still help, I look at more offensive security, and we look at from a not from a only NIST framework, but also we look at MITRE framework, which is adaptable for threat intelligence and hunting. So we wanted to stay ahead of that. So a lot of organizations are actually adopting those strategies, which means the expectation is MSS providers have to scale up their resources and their competency to map that into the services that they're going to offer, right? And what I would like to see is vulnerabilities coming from infra, vulnerabilities on the cloud, misconfigurations on the on-prem, misconfigurations on the cloud, application code, vulnerabilities on-prem, on the cloud. I don't want to see those two different or six different areas I need to go look. I would like the MSSP providers to make it simple, single platform that I can see all the vulnerabilities in one location and be have an ability to auto remediate connecting
Okay.
to the hubs, right? If it's a code, and connecting to Terraform if it's infrastructure as a code. That should be single platform, be able to do both ends of it, right? I think those are the things that I don't see in the market. And I think those are the things that's missing big time from MSSP providers that I see when they come in. There's a lot of addition of bodies and people, which is not a bad thing, but the shift has to be more aggressive towards the automation and bringing it in single pane of glass and plugging into CI/CD pipeline. Although there are few things in CI/CD pipeline happening now, but not completely. There is still manual ways of happening there. Even though it goes to CI/CD pipeline, there is still manual process being followed up on that, right? I'd like to see that. Now, one more thing, right? There are plenty of things, but I want to catch up on this item, which is 0 day. There are remote code execution vulnerabilities or um, Java vulnerabilities like Spring Shell coming up. These are only growing, not going down. I would like to have a solution where if a 0 day occurs or 0 day happens, I don't want to be bombarded with information from hundreds of my vendors all over the place. And it's more the more repeatable stuff. The repeated things are coming back. And if the managed security teams, they are actually struggling to keep up with the information overload. Rather, I will look to one effective solution where all the 0 day is provided as a service within 24 by 7, 24 hours within the 0 day is exposed. And then I should push up a button. I should be able to run all that from a code level or infrastructure level and figure out what are my applications are vulnerable. I would prefer that path. I really want companies, product companies to look at this because that problem is not solved. And a 0 day occurs, including executives, security team members are bombarded with millions of email, which I hated. That needs to be solved, right? So these are all the things which will solve if we start to think about shifting left, meaning taking a lot of things into automation and keep it at predict and prevent rather than responding it, right? Those are the things that I would expect from MSSP providers to think ahead and be able to show that and bring in those solutions and design during the proposal timeframe. So,
well, you were probably one of those guys who also expected the managed service groups to get their job done fast. So you probably have the challenge of always being pushed to be productive, but also doing it in a way with Cyberhealth. So I found that interesting. So as a group, that single pane of glass was important. The single be able to control it before it gets into the production was real important for you too.
yep.
And so your team, who was very good at response, especially you being a blue team person, didn't have more burden on them.
Yeah, no, valid point, Jeff. In a nutshell, you captured it very well. And we want to make sure these resources are cyber resources. And in the market space, if you look at from resourcing, it's difficult to get cyber resources. We want them to be engaged and be proactive in doing creative new things rather than working on repeatable things. And if MSS providers take that notion and also able to do time to market, and as you said, if I'm managing MSSP providers to deliver service for me, I'm delivering services to my customers, which are the application owners and the business owners who need to take their business to the market quickly. And security cannot be a bottleneck for them. And whatever it takes, right? I don't want to be in a complaining stages because this has happened so many years. And we should find a better way to not to be in that stage, rather solve the problem so they don't see it, I don't see it, and it's solved automatically.
Yeah, automation.
Yeah.
Okay, so the red team comes in, Fossey, and you start talking, approaching this problem of shift left, and being able to capture those attack situations is, I mean, right now it's mostly manual, I would think. So, why is shift left so important from your standpoint?
Yeah. So shift left is now like people are talking about that, and companies start to leveraging the power of shift left nowadays, but still it is more on the application side, like a coding side, like an internal company mindset. But again, on the offensive security, that's what's missing still. So let's say we have applications that we want to migrate to the cloud. The MSSP is responsible for that, and they want to migrate like hundreds of virtual machines, containerized applications to the cloud in the short amount of time with the limited resources, and they want to do it in a cost-effective manner. How they can make sure those applications are secured when it goes to the cloud? Because having the security applications, solutions in place, that's something, and being secure is like another thing that we can talk about. So you need a way that you can validate the security of your application and make sure the security posture of your cloud, like as a whole, and also individual applications are maintained. And the best thing to do that is to embrace the shift left mindset and methodology. And the problem is, again, in this area, we have like very limited tool sets, and that's not something that companies and MSSPs are focused on. The solution could be, for the app developers. Let's say they're creating an application, they're containerizing that, and they're putting that in the cloud. The problem that we see after some time, because of the compliance, or because that we have to do that on a quarterly basis or on a yearly basis, we do the pen testing on those applications. And usually the results that we are getting from the pen testing, when it wants to be converted to something that can be understandable by developers, so many stuff lost in translation, and those items are not being applied in the proper manner into the applications. So we have the application developers that they constantly creating application. They want to embrace the power of the cloud. They want to be innovative. They want to use all the capabilities available from the cloud to be able to have more innovation. But at the same time, we have the security people that they want to make sure everything's secure, all the guardrails are in place. And usually those two concepts, those two mindsets are not getting along to each other. And the solution here could be like a shift left approach for the offensive security tooling at the hands of developers. So let's say if a developer, they're creating a software, they're creating a containerized version of their application to migrate to the cloud with the help of an MSSP, the MSSP should be able to provide some tools, methods, and procedures to be able to security scan those applications from an offensive perspective and give an early feedback to developers so they can fix their code. And the code that we're talking about, it could be like an infrastructure code, it could be an application code, it could be like an application running environment. So the necessity of shift left approach in all of those areas are crucial when it goes to the cloud migration application, and especially when we have an MSSP to help the enterprise to do that.
Yeah,
because as you know, yeah.
No, I think if that can be done, that's fantastic. Because if you look at in current organizations, the security team are always questioned by the infrastructure team or the application teams to explain about how this vulnerability is relevant for them, right? And depends on the organization, depends on the security team members. They're able to explain. Most of the time, they couldn't complete the explanation of how this is exploited. And as you mentioned, if a tool can showcase how it can help, for example, Log4j happened, and people are still wondering how this will affect applications in the manner the attackers are exploiting them, right? And there is no clear explanation when it came out, and people are struggling to explain things and to understand where it will go south. So if a platform can actually showcase that and help elevate, and MSSP providers can use that to help the clients will love it. And I think that will solve one of the key problems that we see in the industry is the dependency of the infra team and security team to understand this problem to solve for each other, right? So
It's
that's
a tremendous value add to
it is.
their service of providing a migration, but you add all that security explanation and knowledge of vulnerabilities on top of that, you're going to be looked upon as a much higher level partner in their minds.
Yeah, I would love it. Yeah.
Yeah. So the all that, it's got to have some kind of automation. You can't just sit there and have someone pounding on the developers every time, Kumar. I mean, what would be what would be ideal from your standpoint, that you would expect a managed service person to have?
Yeah, as Farshid was mentioning, that's an expectation that I always have is MSS providers need to stay ahead of the curve with the team that they have, and they should be constantly looking at what's happening and how we are solving that ahead of the curve before it gets to production live, right? And
Constantly.
yeah, and then every time
Continuous.
we like to see only, okay, these things were detected and prevented. And this actually not only supports the organization, this also supports MSS providers. Think about if I switch to an MSSP shoes, right? They are struggling for resources as well. So now, how effectively as an MSSP I would use my resources effectively? I need to go automation, and I'm struggling too because there are not enough solutions or products in the market space which can tie all these ends. There are multiple tools, and we still heavily rely on the resources that I have on MSSI, right? But they also wanted to shift towards automating for them and automating for the customers. So they're not really providing value for themselves, but also providing value to the customers. The MSSP who picks up this and goes faster, and they have a bigger opportunity in the market space where they can help clients use it effectively and also help their customers understand the value that's providing. They won't see the pain points moving forward, and able to have one single platform. Compliance checks off automatically. The application teams are happy with how things are gone in the earlier stages, and also infra teams don't have to spend a lot of time in fixing the code. I'm talking about infrastructure as a code and application codes, and all in one set, right? So that will be beneficial from both sides.
So far as that's all nice and happy, but how yesterday's vulnerabilities, there's today's vulnerabilities, right? You can't staying on top of it is almost. It's impossible to really stay on top of it, isn't it?
That's right. But at the same time, the threat model in on-prem is totally different than the cloud. Like the way that you're securing your on-premise environment, it is based on the IP. You put everything in a subnet or in a class of IP. Put a firewall on, at the front, and then control the traffic, and then you make sure everything is nice and good inside. For example, let's talk about the Log4j or other kind of vulnerabilities. You can see the way that you can secure that, in your on-prem environment. It has less effect, and the reason is if you have a WAF firewall and your WAF firewall understand the signature of the attack, they can just block the traffic and everything inside are safe and we have no problem. But when you migrate to the cloud, and especially when you're migrating hundreds of applications to the cloud in a short amount of time, in a lift and shift manner, all of those vulnerabilities, all of those security depth are basically migrating to the cloud as well. And then cloud is wild. You don't have those models available for you to just secure the gate and make sure everything is good inside, because all of those applications, they could be exposed to the public internet, and those vulnerabilities that they didn't come up in your on-prem environment, they all can be exploited now in the cloud environment. So because the threat model is different and the way that you have to treat those applications in the cloud is a different story, you need to have validation at scale, you need to have automation, you have to make sure you can do it quickly in an efficient manner, and you should have a continuous validation for your application in the cloud. It's not just one-time testing of the application. It's not like a quarterly or yearly. You should have a continuous offensive kind of validation for your application to make sure if a 0-day happened, like the one that Kumar was talking about, all of the security are in place and your cloud environment are secure against those 0-day vulnerability. And that's basically like the change in the mindset that I talked about when we started, the podcast. The mindset should be changed from like a perimeter network kind of design, putting like a gateway and you're good, to a zero trust space. And that could be like a very interesting subject for our upcoming podcast to talk about the zero trust and how we can use an offensive security validation tool to make sure we are doing like a zero trust in a proper way and in a proper architecture design manner. So those are like all the items we have to think about when you're migrating lots of or hundreds of applications in a short amount of time, and make sure those security guards are in place.
Yeah.
So, let me just ask, because we're going to be wrapping this up pretty soon, but Kumar, I mean, what is the idea? What would be maybe the near future? What would be the ideal presentation that a managed service group would give a CISO person like yourself that says we have the best cyber health possible?
Yeah, I think MSS providers should be aspiring to do that, and they do all the time. And moving forward, it's about automation, less friction, and ability to showcase that value, and the ability for them to adjust to the migration for the customers is the key.
Yeah.
And they have to think a little bit advanced in how they're proposing the solution. If you think about MSS for a number of years, it's all about there is a requirement comes from a client, and how do we solve them by adding resources, right? That's the MSSP repeatable model. And I think they have to blend that model with advanced thinking and automation as part of the solution. And they should convince security teams and organizations to do that and showcase the value from there. That go to the extent if they're going serverless, for example, right? And they should definitely bake that in the solution of how are they securing APIs. API is the key. If you go serverless and if you look at microservices and if you look at all the financial transactions and everything, it's all APIs. It's millions of them. It's not going to go away for the next few years. So I think that's the key. And a lot of the security should evolve from that. And organizations look forward to see how advanced are they thinking from an MSS providers and how are they adding value. And I think that's where the key differentiator, what I would see a CISO or a CIOs would be looking at is from a technology perspective and from a value add perspective and from a people perspective, how are they bringing in not just security team, but they should have a combination of infrastructure supported team from a cloud and other areas to be baked in to that as part of the service line. And that's the differentiator. And I don't think some people do, but not many in the space of thinking. It's just due to two facts, right? They're running on timeline and the client says, this is what I need, just give me this, right? And you have those always. But the differentiated viewpoint is what MSS can succeed, and not only selling their service, but also making a win-win for both of them, right? That's kind of where I see MSSP should aspire to go.
Okay, so firstly, from your standpoint, I start this project. I got 15 pen testers ready to validate your work. This migration is going to take over a year. We'll assign 5 or 6 of them. Oh, is that the best way to go, or what's the future of the managed services in that area?
That's the way many MSSPs are doing that right now. But as we talked, it's not scalable. And one reason could be like the DevX and developer experience. And the reason is because when they are starting shifting those applications from the on-prem model to the cloud, there are lots of changes they have to make, and those changes need to be security validated by the security team. And as you mentioned, they have to hire more and more, for example, pen testers or security reviewers to make sure those applications are compliant and those applications are secure. And as of today, there is no self-service model for those developers to be able to get those recommendations right from their studio. For example, any VS Code they're using. As a developer, I want to be like the first person to understand what are the problems with my application. I don't want to be to ship the application, move to the cloud, move to those higher environments, and then all of a sudden, after a few months, understand, hey, there is a very big security risk with this one because you didn't code it or you didn't use a right open source package version that you have to do. The developer experience also should change to a self-service model. So an automated tool can answer those questions, can security check those problems, and give them a very early feedback in the process to those developers. So we have less friction, we have more momentum. The cost would be lower when you compare to hiring people like the manual pen tester that you've mentioned to do this kind of probe for us. And if you do it in a correct way, at the end of the day, everyone would be happy. Both the blue team and also red team cannot find so many problems, and the organization as a whole progress. They can innovate at the speed of the cloud, use those new technologies, and progress in a way that CIO higher levels that they're looking for.
Okay. So everyone's talked, that they manage service groups, solutions, understand what you're facing with a single pane of glass. Don't make it harder on yourself. Automation that is accompanying on a continuous basis the work in identifying some of the threats and vulnerabilities that are part of the migration, the cloud migration. What am I missing? What else was added on top of that?
Ability, right? Ability to take care of 0 days and security effectively. That is something it's not in those contracts, right? So I think that's something very important. That is the big thing people all talk about, and which is true. It comes out, it's a pressure for the client organization to deal with that. So how do they do that? Right? What platforms do they have to help that happen? And the last one is the compliance. So doing all of it, how can they be quickly pull up a report and showcase it?
Yeah.
The security executives, when audit comes in every year, it's internal or external, they ask their teams to work with audit teams. You know how painful they will feel, the technology folks, to take a snapshot, copy it, paste it, and send it. But doing all of this, they should be able to quickly, touch a button, and they should be able to produce a report and showcase it, right? I think those are the key.
That's awesome. Yeah. So any kind of audit reports from SOC 2, HIPAA, all the other types of requirements out there, having reports that demonstrate how you took care of vulnerabilities is very important too. For a managed service group, especially.
Yeah.
Okay. Frosty, do you want to add anything on top of that?
No, I think we covered good areas regarding the MSSPs, and no, I'm good.
Okay. Well, we are coming to the end, and I really appreciate you two getting on and explaining the red and the blue perspective of how to have cyber health. Cyber health is going to be brought up several times in our future podcast. I think the mindset of having a person representing and a kind of the offensive side and someone who is very used to the blue perspective will and team is very interesting and will make some very positive podcasts in the future. So looking forward to those. We're looking at that on the next topic. I think we just uncovered that, having a 0-day discussion, and certainly appropriate for having so many attacks happening as we speak. Thank you guys for being part of our live LinkedIn presentation, and we will say goodbye to everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.